Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean's developer cloud makes it simple to launch in the cloud and scale up as you grow. They have an intuitive control panel, predictable pricing, team accounts, worldwide availability with a 99.99 uptime SLA, and 24/7, 365 world-class support to back that up. DigitalOcean makes it easy to deploy, scale, store, secure, and monitor your cloud environments. Head to do.co/changelog to get started with a $100 credit. Again, do.co/changelog.
Let's do it. It's go time.
Welcome to Go Time, your source for diverse discussions from around the Go community. Listen live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern at changelog.com/live. Join the Gopher Slack and hop into Go Time FM channel to be part of the hijinks, and subscribe at changelog.com/GoTime. Okay, here we go.
Hello, and welcome to Go Time. I'm Matt Ryer. Today we're talking about organizing in the community. You know all those meetups and conferences you go to? And there's food there and like great content and everything's just worked out. Well, it turns out that's quite difficult to achieve. And we're going to dig into that a little bit today and learn a bit more about that, I think. So joining me on today's show, we have Ronna Steinberg and Natalie Pistonovich. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
We also have Johnny Borsico. It's only Johnny Borsico. Hello, Johnny.
Hello, Matt.
How's it going?
It goes. You know, I've been indoors for a little while, so it's good to have some human, interaction that basically aren't my family. So, hello, everybody. Happy to see you.
No pressure? There's loads of pressure now. Great. We're Johnny's friends for the week.
Right,
We're the ones he's going to get to hang out with. Yeah, so I asked our guests for some mini bios, and they're not so mini. I didn't realize how much you do for the community, I must admit. Natalie, 3 meetups and 3 conferences you organize, and that's phenomenal. And the one that I know about, the Gophercon Europe, is a phenomenal conference, so it's excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. And Ronna, organizer of the Women Who Go Berlin and of the Diversity Scholarships for GoBridge.
Correct.
Yes.
I think I'm dragged into every adventure that Natalie sends me or sends my way. So, yeah.
Are you happy about that, Ronna? Or is that a problem, or is that okay?
No, I think it's great. It's working so far, so no complaints here, yeah.
2 things Matt missed from my bio is that I'm a developer advocate at Aerospike, but more importantly, I'm a big fan of Ronna.
Yeah,
so it's great
that's on your
to
bio?
have this adventure. This is in my bio
That's in her bio.
for
yeah.
the show.
I missed that part. I didn't read that part. I'm so sorry. I would have. I think it's a mutual thing. I think a lot of people know about this. So yeah.
Well, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Well, actually, so that our listeners can get to know you, for those that haven't met you, maybe we could start off with a working from home tip from each of you. That would be great. New regular slot of the show. Working from home tips. Ronna, do you want to go first?
I think Natalie should actually go first. I mean, she does have more experience with this. I have more experience, I think, on the managing this part. So.
Okay. Natalie, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. I've been working more remote than not for a while now. And the thing that helps me more than anything is to start the day as if I'm going somewhere. So have a good breakfast, enjoy my coffee, brush my teeth, wash my face, and change into the loungewear, which is also comfy clothes, but it's not the pajamas.
I see. So you make a sort of that thing of making a distinction about when you're in work mode versus in home mode.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, so for me,
Mm.
it's more about, I think, the quality of delivering pretty much anything. So a lot of us are very used to, the agile way of doing things, delivering things very rapidly. I think everybody, because communication is harder right now, it creates a massive amount of ping pong. So whether it's defining a task, whether it's actually delivering a bug fix, whatever it is, it needs to be in very high quality. The same goes for code reviews. If you write a message that somebody doesn't understand, like, try to be mindful of other people in this process, because it's addictive, right? Like delivering things very, very, very quickly. It's addictive. And right now, everybody, I think, needs to slow down a little bit.
That sounds great. And I think you're right about, this idea of asynchronous communication. When you're in an office with somebody, the conversations can be very different. They can be very short little sentences, lots of kind of nice pleasantries amongst it. But yes, if it's asynchronous, it is worth spending a bit more time on that clarity and things, especially if we're going to have different schedules as well. I think that's a great one, Ronna.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how did you get into organizing then? Natalie, where did your involvement in this kind of come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been trying to think about that, and probably it goes back to since forever. Like, I've been on the students' union in school, in university, throughout life. And then when I moved to Berlin, I went to some conference that I found, which was the Berlin Dev Fest, organized by the local GDG, Google Developer Group communities. And I just spoke to somebody randomly, and he said, "Oh, you're doing Go, you should help me organize the Go meetup." And that was Sulma, who was organizing the Go meetup for the first 3 years in Berlin. And then I came to the very first meetup, and he said, "Oh, by the way, I'm moving to London. Good luck." And that's how I became the organizer of the Go user group. And then from there, it came to other meetups. And the idea for Gophercon started with really admiring Gophercon in the US, but not having a European version of it. So just saying, all right, let's do this.
Yeah. So when you moved to a new city then, is this quite a good way to meet new people as well and to kind of jump into existing communities?
Definitely.
Yeah. Gophercon EU, for those that don't know, is actually moves around, doesn't it?
Gophercon Europe does move around, not only in EU countries, but in all European countries.
Yeah.
We love you, UK people.
Yeah.
Even though that there is a Gophercon UK.
Right. Yes. Well, there was one in Tenerife, which was...
Yes.
Nobody believed me when I said I had to go there for a conference, by the way. No one believed
There was
me.
one in Iceland, in Reykjavik.
Yeah, the Iceland one was also excellent. And this year, what's happening with
Berlin. Well, this year, if you'd asked me a few months ago, I would have told you Berlin, and this is where it would end. But now I'm telling there is a pandemic, so hopefully Berlin. See how things develop.
Yeah. And what about you, Ronna, then? How did you get into organizing as part of the community like this?
Well, it's a strange story, really. I lived in Berlin. I was a gopher in Berlin for 2 years, and then I moved to the Netherlands. And accidentally, I signed up for a meetup in Berlin, for a Go meetup in Berlin. And I canceled, I don't know, probably 2 minutes later, but somebody was stalking the list of people. And that somebody was not Natalie, it was Vanessa Ortiz, who was the organizer of Women Who Go Berlin back then. And she was looking for women who were doing Go to come and mentor. And she immediately checked and found my LinkedIn. Immediately like, "Oh, you know Go. You've been doing it for a while. Can you come help?" But I wasn't even in the city. And then I decided to move back to Berlin, and I was basically handed down the chapter, an already made chapter. It took about, I think, 2 minutes for me to decide, when she asked me if I wanted to take over, to decide to do it. And I really thought it was a bad idea, but I did it. I'm very happy that I did it. And the rest is history, as well as my friendship with Natalie. And by the way, Natalie gave a talk about new people and about organizing meetups and about her journey at Gophercon in Denver. And I advise anyone who is interested in insights to watch it. It's very good.
Okay, cool. That's probably available on YouTube now, isn't it?
Yes.
But the thing about learning, so Natalie, maybe you could give us a clue. How could people find that? What was that called? Do you remember?
Closing Keynote 2018.
Cool. That'll do. Just trying to give everyone the search terms.
I think it was something, the value of new, or
The importance of beginners.
the importance of beginners. Okay.
Yes, I remember. Very good. So yeah, we do recommend that. We'll put that in our show notes as well. So some of the conferences are kind of commercial. Others are more, they're sort of just community, and they just sort of balance the costs and things. And what is it that drives you to, in particular, to keep going with it? Because I mean, I've spoken at some conferences and done a few other little bits and pieces, but not much. And even just that small exposure, I realize how difficult it is. So why do you keep doing it? What is in it for you?
The chance to do some anarchy. So I never had a conference shirt in the size extra small until it was my conference.
Really?
And then it was ranging from extra small to 5 extra large.
Right.
So I like onesies for babies, which is really cute. But also more other type of things, like having spent some time living in Kenya and talking to people and learning how hard and disconnected the regular everyday in certain areas from what I'm used to from Europe got me really realizing how hard it is to be part of this if you're not living in a place like the US or in Europe. And just doing a call for paper usually will not get you to reach such people. And so I get a chance to use the network that I built there to every year to fly in speakers or attendees from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia. And this is nice to be able to do this.
Yeah, because otherwise there probably isn't a conference or even a meetup, is there, near them?
There is.
But they do have meetup and conferences?
There are meetups. There's a meetup in Nairobi this year. Gophercon Africa was supposed to kick off in Nigeria. See how that goes as well with all the global plans changing. But you see how big the disconnection is.
Yes.
And being able to help a little bit to bridge this gap is a huge reason for me to do this.
Yeah, that's great. That is great.
There's a very exciting community right now in Nairobi, and I suspect Lagos as well, but incredible engagement over there with Go. I think, how many people do they have right now, Natalie? I think you probably know.
How many people sign up to the meetup in Nairobi?
I think so.
Lower hundreds?
No, I don't think so. I think it's higher. I'll find it.
Hmm.
You do you, and I'll find this information.
I did a remote meetup in Lagos. They do have it's a great community there.
In Nigeria, for sure, it's bigger.
Yeah, and if people want to, if there's anyone out there that wants to do a kind of speak at a conference or a meetup and it's their first time, doing a remote one actually has quite a lot of benefits. You can kind of be in a space that you feel safe in, and everything's more familiar and comfortable, and you can still deliver a good talk. And hopefully, as long as all the internets work as they're supposed to, it was a great experience. So I do recommend that. But you can't really beat actually kind of going and physically being in a place, and that's the advantage for conferences, right? That's the advantage to fly them over. Did you find that thing, Rana?
Yeah, I have an update. We have in the Nairobi Gophers group, there are 870, this is a round number, members. Is woohoo to them.
Yeah, 870.
Yeah, that's
nice.
Impressive. Very
Yeah.
impressive.
And there will also be lots of people hopefully listening where they sort of they don't feel like there is representation, or there isn't a meetup in their area. What can they do? I mean, it can't be. It doesn't sound easy to just kind of start a meetup, is it?
That depends a lot on all kinds of things. If you have a place you can go to and ask, please give me space, then it's definitely easier to roll because you can host a remote talk, like you said. You can find maybe a speaker from the community or give yourself a talk or just host a fishbowl session, a Q&A, watch some other talk together. But finding a space is not always obvious. If your company is able to host this is great. If you know some co-working space that will give this is also great. But this is never taken for granted.
Well, I guess it really depends on the city, right? If there are other active communities in your area, you can approach them and see how they're doing it. That's what I did. It was very helpful for me. I did not pretend at all that I could do it on my own from the start.
Before we move on, I'm curious as to what some of the challenges beyond venue, and I'm not sure if food, tends to be sort of part of the meetups as when they organize in those environments, as they tend to be, with sort of US or Europe-based meetups. So beyond venue and food, which are common, I would imagine, across all meetup organization, but what are beyond these? What is sort of the most challenging sort of aspects for, like, say, a meetup in Lagos or a meetup in Nairobi? Beyond that, what are some of the other concerns that you have to contend with that you necessarily don't have to, in the States or in the UK or something like that?
I think that's a great question. And from the little bit that I got to see, Go is not yet as popular. So that you can find many people individually working on this, but the network is still being built. For comparison, the Berlin user group, I think, has almost 2,000 people, and many of them work in companies that are using Go. So, and even in the Berlin meetup, it's sometimes hard to find people to give a talk because they think their project is boring, because they think, oh, it's just what I'm doing at work. So if this is a language you're learning for fun, and you're coming to listen and not necessarily to give the talk, then having enough speakers is harder. But this is harder with any community that is beginning. And I think that Go isn't just not yet as popular there. Another thing is what Matt mentioned, doing remote talks. This is great that the internet worked all the way through. This is also something that's not obvious. And you probably need to pre-record this as a backup or just count on everybody's patience if there's some kind of a hiccup with the internet.
Yeah, the London Gophers, actually, they put all of their talks online as well. So they're just on YouTube. And that's nice for anyone, obviously, that can't make it. But it is also nice to kind of get a sense of what these meetups are like. But you don't really see some of the main advantages which you get from actually physically meeting in person, which we perhaps shouldn't dwell on at the moment, but eventually we're going to be back to normal. We're going to be back at meetups and stuff. So what are some of the advantages for people attending conferences and meetups, do you think?
The way we do things at Women Who Go Berlin is actually what's happening right now globally is a drawback for us, because the way that we do this, because when I started out, there were very few women that we could find that were professional in Go, and this was a Women Who Go chapter. And I wanted to train people as fast as I could. So I came up with a format where I go to companies that want to host Women Who Go Berlin, and we would come up with a challenge that has something to do with what they do. And then our members would do a real life sort of in the industry level challenge, something that takes 2 to 3 hours. By the way, you mentioned at the beginning the waveform going up when you clicked your fingers. We drew a waveform at a SoundCloud meetup. That was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. We do them once a month. Of course, right now it's a bit of a problem. What it does, it actually leverages the fact that everybody is in the same room, and then I can group them up sort of to make sure that people will finish the challenge, which is ideally what should happen. And we do cool things, and it's a lot of fun. And this is a very big setback for us, so we're trying to figure out what to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, moving that all online is for sure going to be a challenge. So I didn't realize that's not just a meetup that you're describing then, Ronna. That is like where you actually get together and work and build something.
It's workshops, yeah.
So that's really cool. And that's a whole different ball game as well. So much to get your hands on and get stuck into. I find hands-on experience is a great way to learn for a lot of people, especially me. So yeah, learning by actually building is a nice thing that others ought to probably think about as well.
Yeah. It comes from, my own experience. I mean, if there's one thing that I learned in my career, it's that I learned best when I was paid to learn something and I was actually doing it on the job. And so I'm giving people the opportunity to learn on the job. They have access to mentors from the hosting company. The hosting company gets to maybe try and recruit people off of that so they can, a bit of a market going on. I'm not going to deny it, which is hopefully we'll get a lot of people recruited and a lot of people hired, and we'll increase the community. So
great.
Yeah, I think you touched a really important point, which is exactly this place to seek for opportunities, because yes, it's possible to chat with everybody in an online event, but it's not the same as talking to people from the hosting company or talking to people from other companies who are looking to hire. Many people find their next jobs in such events or in meetups or in conferences. And when your pool of opportunities of companies that you can go to is smaller because there's not so many big companies or there's not so many companies that are using Go, to answer your question, Johnny, I think this is another big difference between meetups that I noticed in Europe versus Africa, just from being present in those two mainly.
I'm curious if you've encountered any perhaps sort of cultural barriers as well in those environments, or is the sort of age group sort of young enough and progressive enough to not be hindered by certain things that hold folks back? And I'm gonna sort of be blunt here and basically say that in certain parts of the world, Africa included, which is kind of like what we've been talking about here, there are men who cannot stand having a woman go up and on stage and teach them and try to teach them something. Right, that's a very real thing. In some parts of the world we might think that's backwards, but there are parts of the world that are still sort of very anti, women being in sort of any sort of leadership or otherwise kind of positions, or even if it's for a 25-minute talk, right? So that is something that it can be perceived as challenging their authority in some way. So there are these kinds of things that still exist that I'm wondering if they play a role, right? At least from what you've seen, if any of these things are sort of playing a role in sort of the maybe the frequency or how well those events go, how welcoming and inclusive they end up being. Do women end up coming back to these events? Do they feel safe enough to be part of these communities? And as we all know, there's toxic environments everywhere, right? So what kind of challenges are they facing in those environments that might be different from ours?
That's a really great question, and my answer is probably really biased because I've only participated in the events that I was invited to, obviously. So I did not get a chance even to be part of such events. But probably so Kenya felt to me very open-minded in that sense, and probably the most place that had, let's say, most people with traditional outfits. That is, if that's any indicator, was actually Mauritius, an island in Africa. And even there, men that had a very traditional outfit with like this koftan and the head cover still were there and listening to my talk, asking questions. But I'm sure that this is because they read the agenda and they saw that there's going to be a woman speaker. And if they would not want that, they would not show up there in the first place. So definitely that exists. Definitely that's a problem. This is not something that I personally experienced because usually it's announced who the speakers are. But it's really important that you're raising awareness to this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I was going to say there's also places that aren't hospitable to women. Hacker News, that's also on there.
Well, you can hide better there.
Yeah, you can lurk. You can have a male-ish, code name, username or something.
Yeah.
Actually, I spoke at a conference in Lviv in Ukraine, and I don't know really, but just superficially, the mix was about 50-50 men and women, which did look strange at a tech conference, I must admit. And I actually made the point that, in a way, I reckon if you can get over that, because we do have that problem in tech, we do have this problem. And if we can get away from it, we're going to just amplify everything, all our potential. That's the thing. I feel like we hold ourselves back by these kind of old-fashioned attitudes. And I made the point to those young, they were quite young students, but I made the point that if you can solve this problem, or maybe it's just not a problem at all, it gives you an advantage in the world, which I do believe.
Something I want to say something about kind of a different perspective. I think there's a lot of misconception around this topic. There is a big misconception, I think, around this. There's something to be said for hard work and this idea that hard work is going to get you anywhere in life. And the people who believe in these things, that if you tried hard enough, you will get there. And therefore, in this just world bias, it's what it's called. And therefore, if a certain population is not getting there, then they're just not willing to put in the work, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of misconception around that because it's a beautiful idea, and the people who believe that are usually very good people. And, the reality is that hard work is not going to get you everywhere. At least, for some people, maybe it will, maybe it won't. And also, there's we're seeing right now how much security there is in that, right? So I think we probably shouldn't mark certain people with certain ideas as the enemy, or target them as such, because they're not bad people. They just don't necessarily understand what is happening, especially in this industry, because it's very, very easy to overlook certain problems that we have. It's a big manifesto, I know.
Yeah, no, it is.
For me personally, I think I've been fortunate enough to have been part of the industry for a long time, and I've seen sort of that thing you're talking about where folks are like, well, you got to where you are because you worked hard. Well, yes, but I've also seen people who work hard, just as hard or harder than me, and because they didn't have sort of maybe they didn't know the right people at the right time, or they didn't have access to a certain person or a certain company or whatever it is. This thing about sort of work alone gets you to where you need to be. I think deep down everybody knows that's not true. It's never been that's table stakes. Everybody has to work hard, and those who are privileged enough that don't have to work as hard and they just have the connections can go, basically they can just skip a few steps, and again, more power to them, whatever that ends up being for them. But I think if everybody's sort of working hard, what we're trying to do, I think I'm gonna speak for Natalie and for you, Rana, for a little bit here. What I think we're all trying to do, because I think we're all, all part of the sort of this organization of community events group. I think what we try to do is basically create opportunities for people to learn and engage, right? So basically we're broadening the surface area for connections to happen, for learning to happen, right? We're creating opportunities. We can't open some doors for people because I don't know about you, but I don't have that much pull. I can't place somebody at a company, and say, hey, have a job, right? I can't give you a job. I can create opportunities, right, for you to come and to meet and to learn and to participate and to engage and to give, right? To give some of yourself and some of your time, right? And the more you give, the more you receive, right? So I think we all create opportunities, right, for these things to happen. We broaden the surface area, whereby that's something that just wasn't being done at all, just 10 years ago, right? Like events weren't focused on sort of creating opportunities for people. They were focused on showcasing certain individuals, ability to talk and to sell and to pitch. I mean, if you've noticed, meetups, we didn't call them meetups back then, but meetings of this type were I remember when I first started going to the meetings, and I mean, they were so high level. They were not geared towards beginners. They were not geared towards sort of being inclusive. And I'm not just talking about gender or race or anything like that. They were, it's almost like they were it was like the guild of wizards. You show up and it's like they're talking about these very high level concepts, and nothing against that, but the focus wasn't on building community per se. It was like, hey, we all know the magical incantations for things. Let's just get together and talk. It's kind of like an old boys club where, you get your scotch and your cigar and you're kind of complimenting each other, patting each other on the back kind of thing. That was really what it felt like, right? It wasn't, the focus wasn't on creating opportunities for learning. I know I'm kind of generalizing a little bit here, and please forgive me for that, but that's just been my personal experience, right? So as to some degree, I've seen that in our tech careers, and have decided to, rather than complain about it, to do something about it, right? So I think that's why, in part, we're all kind of in this and doing this. But yeah, I think I'm 100% behind what you said, Ron. It's not just about working hard. That's a given. In my mind, that's a given. It's about basically finding the opportunities, and in some cases helping to create them yourself. And hopefully that comes back around and it works out for you as well. But I think it's about the more opportunities you try to create for others, the more you're going to find yourself. And it's not just hard work. Never been.
I'd like to add actually something to that, if that's okay, because Natalie and
Please.
we talk about this a lot. So to anyone who might be listening to this, we put a lot of effort in the scholarship. We put a lot of effort into bringing people from really all over the world to certain conferences where they can maybe find opportunity, which is really what we want to increase. But then there's always this concern that the people who do come are not necessarily right now, and that's also okay, are not necessarily right now at a place where they can leverage, where they can, just make up their mind, jump on an opportunity, and wherever it takes me, like, I'm just going to go. And it's okay. But, if I could speak to anyone who applies to this scholarship, like, what I would like to tell them is just be aware that the people that you're going to meet, at least some of them can actually, it may not be you, Johnny, or, me particularly, but there could be somebody out there that is right now recruiting. Like, create the space when opportunity knocks and you're ready. You might actually take it. I think it's very, very important, because we put a lot of work into this, and we're always worried that, on the one hand, we don't want to pressure anybody, but on the other hand, we don't want to see opportunities go to waste.
How much time does your team spend building and maintaining internal tooling? I'm talking about those behind-the-scenes apps, the ones no one else sees. The S3 uploader you built last year for the marketing team, that quick Firebase admin panel that lets you monitor key KPIs, maybe even the tool your data science team hacked together so they can provide custom ad spend analytics. Now, these are tools you need, so you build them, and that makes sense. But the question is, could you have built them in less time, with less effort, and less overhead and maintenance required? And the answer to that question is yes. That's where Retool comes in. Rohan Chopra, engineering director at DoorDash, has this to say about Retool. Quote, "The tools we've been able to quickly build with Retool have allowed us to empower and scale our local operators, all while reducing the dependency on engineering," end quote. Now, the internal tooling process at DoorDash was bogged down with manual data entry, missed handoffs, and long turnaround times. And after integrating Retool, DoorDash was able to cut the engineering time required to build tools by a factor of 10x and eliminate the error-prone manual processes that plague their workflows. They were able to empower back-end engineers who wouldn't otherwise be able to build front ends from scratch. And these engineers were able to build fully functional apps in Retool in hours, not days or weeks. Your next step is to try it free at retool.com/changelog. Again, retool.com/changelog.
Could you tell us a bit more about the scholarship then, please?
There's a lot to say about this scholarship. I think I wrote a document once for GoBridge on how I do this, and I started with having no idea what I was doing. So Natalie basically pinged me one day. It's always on Facebook Messenger. Don't ask me why, but all opportunities are always showing up on Facebook Messenger, like the place where you least expect it, really, and you don't take seriously ever.
I haven't had any opportunities on Facebook Messenger. I did have, I tell a lie, I did have the opportunity to have some hair with one of the filters. So I enjoyed that, but not quite what you're talking about, is it?
It's important too, though. Like, do not,
Well, for context, for a long time, the Facebook Messenger is where Rona and me would chat about life. We would just use that as our regular communication channel.
It's embarrassing, really. Yeah.
We have since then upgraded, and we have part of that on WhatsApp.
And Slack, and then there's like all the Gophers Slacks, all of them. So there's the Gophers, there's the women who go one, there's the women who go Berlin one. So all of them, I can find random messages. Yeah. So whenever I want to search for something that Natalie sent me, I have to search, I think, 5 different places until I can find it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I know that pain. Yep.
So she asked me to do this. I really didn't have any idea how something like that could be done. And I immediately then said yes, obviously, because, so that's just how I do things. So then I found out, okay, I need to create a form for applications. And then it turned out that it's quite a headache of trying to figure out what to say in that form, because if people are replying, for instance, how do you ask somebody what underrepresented group they belong to? Because when we ask them what underrepresented groups they identify with, people who are not necessarily a native English speaker just said, all of them. I identify with every single fight from every underrepresented group out there. And so I think there's a lot of that going on, and then how to get people to trust you over a form with personal information that, is quite sensitive, and a lot of things that happen in there. Then there is forming a committee to figure out who's going to go, which is very, very, very hard to tell people that they are going to measure other people. And it's a very, very difficult task, I think. And I'm glad, actually, that I don't rank people and I don't decide who goes, because that makes my life a bit easier. And then take all of that data. And then there is the logistics of hotel, flights, and all of that stuff. And some of these people are flying for the very first time in their lives, and they're going to be doing it on their own.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
That changes a lot, doesn't it? That changes a lot if you think about it.
It is scary for me, like I find myself like once in a while, like, okay, so do they know what to do if they miss a connection? Do I know what to do if I miss a connection? Like, I find myself like struggling with these questions. And yeah, it's and there's a massive leap of faith happening like on the week of, and then hopefully, the magic happens and it works out. It's not easy.
So you must be able to build a lot of trust, though, because people wouldn't do that if you hadn't already done that, right? If you hadn't been able to build that foundation of trust, probably you wouldn't get people being able to come.
I think people want it enough so that they can take. And yeah, we email a lot. Like, I get to know pretty much everyone pretty well who is going at that age, at least. So it's not easy, because at some point, for instance, like something that has occurred to me when we were in the US, and this is actually not a Go Bridge scholarship, I think, or there was a woman. She did not have travel insurance, and we're in the US. And what happens if tomorrow, she needs X-ray? So I think these scholarships really need to take things very, very seriously. So we are fortunate to be doing this in Europe. Like, if we're talking about Gophercon Europe, it's easier because things are not as expensive. We can definitely figure it out. But otherwise, I would probably have decided to fund everyone's travel insurance.
What I would like to add is some things that probably one of the biggest challenges is actually to find people to fill out the scholarship.
Really?
Because you made a form. Right. You're tweeting this in your social media and you're saying, hey, friends, please retweet this. You're tweeting this from the conference social media. You're tweeting this from GoBridge. And then you have the same reach of the same people who know and are familiar with those conferences. But how do you reach those people in the different meetups we talked about that are not part of this smaller community of Go developers in Europe, Go developers in the US? Starting to reach those is, I don't know, for me feels like half of the work. This is what I did in the first year was go to meetup.com, go to womentechmakers.com. So all those platforms list different types of meetups and just start searching for keywords. And I personally texted on Twitter and on Meetup and on Facebook to those different groups. Hi, women who tech in Lesotho, please share this with your attendees. Being able to reach people outside of your immediate or even first or second degree of connections is incredibly hard.
So you find existing communities and go there as one way.
Yes, this is one thing you do. Another thing is that in those events, in those meetups, whenever I get a chance to give a workshop or a talk somewhere that is not Europe and not the US, I'm making sure to stay in touch with as many people as possible so that later I'll be able to tell them, hey, this is the time for the scholarship. Please share this with anybody you think can be relevant. Just this part of finding enough people who are actually outside of your reach to fill out this form is a lot of work.
Well, I can imagine actually all of it sounds like a lot of work.
Yes.
So if we have anyone listening, who is the scholarship open for? Where can they get more information about it? Because you never know, there might be someone listening who don't know about this.
We share this on all the Twitters we can, of the one of the conference, of the one of GoBridge, on our personal ones.
The one thing I'll add to that is the reaching people outside of your bubble or your sphere of influence, whether it be second, third degree. It's, if you can manage somehow to do that, I think the one of the things that I personally try to do is to actually meet people where they are, not just online, but actually physically. So the reason why I enjoy being close to Baltimore is that there's a thirst there for technology and for learning. And a lot of people there look like me. So, when I organize a workshop, I do my darndest with the help of other community members, which I rely on quite a bit, to help get the word out there and to bring more of those folks, right, into the workshop, right? So you kind of have to be willing to sort of go into, those communities, because those people are not going to come to you per se. First of all, they may not even have heard of your event or your conference or your meetup or your workshop, whatever it is, right? So the job of reaching them is one. Second, you have to go to them because they've been overlooked for decades. Not your one little event, right, is not going to do much to all of a sudden make them feel comfortable about coming out and being exposed, right, and vulnerable out in this community that you and I may find to be quite navigable because we've been in it for a long time. But for them, it's extremely intimidating. And here's the other thing too. I think, the importance of representation, the importance of seeing, of somebody seeing Natalie give a closing keynote at a Gophercon, right? The importance of that, right? Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Right, I did. Indeed, I did. For those who don't know, I did do it last year. But yeah, to me, like that closing keynote talk you gave was inspiring, because we know in the Go community specifically that a lot of the people that are coming into the community are brand new. There are now more beginners, right, in the Go community than there are experienced folks. That's the truth. And that number is only going to continue to grow. So we have to somehow make it okay, right? We have to say, hey, like, this is a community of learners, of beginners, right? Maybe you're learning Go for the first time. Maybe you're coming from a different language or a different community. It doesn't matter. We are all, in some sense, we're all beginners, right? Because even experienced within the community, we are learning from the beginners as well, right? It's not like we reached a pinnacle and we've stopped learning. Like, we're still learning too. We're all learning together, right? So the importance of actually making it okay, right? To say, hey, you know what? we know it's intimidating from the outside, but let us help you, right, be part of this community. I think it's huge. So yes, kudos to you, Natalie. And that was a very enjoyable talk. It kind of gave me courage to do mine the following year. But yeah, I think these things are important.
Well, thank you for a great talk.
Yeah, well, they're both good.
Thanks, man.
They're all right.
Johnny had a quote which was great, and it said, community gives back. So it's like this idea that you don't just expect the tech community to just give stuff to you. It gives back. And the best way to sort of best way to be part of that community is to sort of get stuck in. And I think that point resonated quite well. That definitely makes sense. When you're organizing something, it's all about that organization and all the effort you go into making the plan. Or is there an element of improvisation that has to be there because when it comes to it, you don't know what's going to happen?
Of course, there's a huge place for that. There's a saying that what's not flexible breaks, and you can make all the plans you want, but if you insist on 100% sticking to them and then something unexpected or changing or different from the plans happen, if you are not open to improvise, this will not work.
I'd love to hear any stories that either of you have for things like that. I love it when things go wrong, but then the last minute you save the day. That's the kind of story we want. What we don't want is something went terribly wrong and, it ended in tragedy.
Dies war die Plan, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If it was the plan all along, that's an entirely different. That's sort of evil organizing in the community. We'll do a separate episode on that.
Well, this is the reason I was proposing the name Chaos Engineering for this episode, because making a conference is a lot like that. You do your best to have a good. The equivalent of uptime would be things functioning as planned, but you always have to be prepared for when it's not going well, because preparing for when it does go well is the easy part.
It's kind of like writing Go code. We deliberately handle errors all the time, don't we? It's sort of expect things to go wrong. It kind of works.
Yeah, pretty much. Error-driven development, right?
Yeah, why not? Yeah. And what about you, Ronna? Have you got any... What's the sort of worst thing that's happened, but it's been okay in the end?
The worst thing that happened, I feel like there's been a few. I never remember them. Like, they never make an impression.
Oh, that's good.
But yeah, no, I mean, like, yeah, I guess because I think like if you have a mature enough community, things can break and nothing will happen. Well, there was this one incident where I twisted my ankle on the way to give a talk at Natalie's group in the GDG Golang, and they ended up having a fishbowl instead. That ended up being an amazing actual experience for diversity, I guess. It was a victory there. Do you want to tell the story?
You summarized it really well.
I wasn't there, so I actually don't necessarily know what happened exactly because I wasn't there.
So you can't tell the story. You can't tell the story because your ankle. This is great. It's like your ankle broke on the way to telling this story. So, Ronna, what did they do instead? I missed it. It sounded like you said there's a fishbowl.
I was told a lot of stories about what happened, but I actually can't give a first-hand account for this.
So we started the fishbowl session with Ellen, who was the first speaker, and myself. We proposed the topic of becoming a GDE. And then there were some questions around that. And then the next topic was, gosh, I cannot remember, but I'm pretty sure the topic that impressed Rona the most was when one of the Women Who Go members who came to this meetup, and she started asking the crowd on being a beginner in Go. And she got a lot of great tips and was practically handling the crowd on her own for about 15 minutes and learned a lot, taught the group a lot.
That's great.
Rona, was this what you're focusing on?
Yeah, I guess. I think it's like the story of the year as far as I'm concerned. By the way, she just got a job as a full-fledged gopher. So kudos to her. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Kudos to you, Rona.
She wasn't responsible for your breaking your ankle, though, right?
The twisting. I didn't actually break it, and I was probably a little. I dramatized it just had too much, I guess. You know, I really didn't, my ankle really didn't fit into my shoe and I really couldn't walk. But the next day I could, and I felt very silly. So, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
This entire meetup was a one huge adventure because it was the first meetup of this year of 2020. And usually we have the last meetup of the previous year, so in December, in the beginning of December, and then the first meetup of the year in January, we have in the end of the year. So this is the one time where we have more than a month apart, but almost 2 months apart. And it's the holiday season, so everybody's out of office and like longer vacations and so on. And our hosting company was not answering the emails. They were not answering on Slack and they were not answering on Twitter. And it's been a few days that they were unresponsive, and we started pinging them in a slightly more intense manner. And then what ended up happening is that the day before of the event, I went to their office in person and said, hello, we all have a meetup tomorrow. And
you tried
said,
Slack, you tried Twitter, you tried email, you tried all the ways that you can get through
I
to
also
run.
called them by the number on Google Maps.
But then, final resort.
No answers, yeah. And then I showed up in person, and then they said that since they committed, so usually companies commit a few months ahead. We have this kind of a queue. They decided not to use Go, so they would not be interested in hosting us anymore, which is normally fine. But when it happens one day before the meetup, this is less cool.
I know, they could have said that. That would have been so much easier.
Yeah. And then I started tweeting, so anybody feels spontaneous and would like to host us, because we have 2 great talks and we have people, have babysitters and whatnot ready to come to give, to listen to talks. And then after a few hours, they decided, well, we made a promise, we'd like to keep the commitment. And so the meetup went through as planned. So this was a perfect way to start the year. It's like a gun in first act.
Yeah.
To what's going to come to this year in general.
Yeah. And I like to think that company then allowed the meetup to happen and then saw it and thought, do you know what? We're not going to use Rust. We're going to go back to Go.
Oh,
That's
this
what,
would be amazing. I should ask them, you're right.
If we make this into a Netflix special, that's what has to happen. You just got to give people what they want.
What up, nerds? I got some pretty awesome news to share with you. Pluralsight is totally free for the entire month of April. I'm not kidding. Seriously, head to pluralsight.com/changelog and skill up while you stay at home. For the entire month of April, you'll get access to over 7,000 courses from experts in software development, security, cloud, and data. There's never been a better time to skill up. Head to pluralsight.com/changelog. Again, pluralsight.com/changelog.
So as attendees, as people that are going to take part in this community but aren't involved in organising, what things can we do to make your lives easier? That's always an interesting thing to think about, I think, and often the answers surprise me, so it might be nice for people to hear. Is there anything in particular that we should or shouldn't be doing that we do, that we probably just don't even know we're doing it?
I would be curious to hear, after answering this, what is the most surprising answer you heard?
Okay.
So the 2 things that I would love for attendees to do is, 1, assume everything is on good faith. This includes things like changing plans or not doing things as you hoped it will be, or misunderstanding something and so on. And mainly being the first person to follow the instructions. For example, when you say break is over, go back to class, leading the group to go back into the room. There's not enough words to stress how helpful it is to stick to the agenda and to make things smooth. To clap whenever it's the time. To laugh if somebody said a joke that is like, it's funny enough for you to understand that this is a joke.
Yeah.
To tweet, to share whatever you learned on social media, if it's Twitter, if it's writing about this on your blog and so on. All those small gestures really help a lot.
My problem is, right, when I do it, I sometimes try and do a joke, but I miss out that bit of letting people know that it's a joke. That's the bit that I miss out. Otherwise, I feel like they would be laughing. But yeah, they just don't know it's a joke. They just think it's a sentence.
So if you have to tell them it's a joke, it's not.
Right. I don't tell them. It's just awkward silence. Yeah.
Rona, what do you think?
Yeah, what about you, Rona?
Keep your RSVPs up to date, I guess, would be the first thing that, would come to mind, because we don't want to waste food. I'm not going to say that we're wasting beer, because this is Berlin and we never waste the beer, but I mean, at least the food. Don't want to waste food.
Mm-hmm. And also, if it's sold out, it frees up a slot, doesn't it, for someone else to go?
Yeah.
So if you can't make it, go back into whatever tool you said you were going to make it with, and let them know you're not going to make it. That is important, especially.
Yeah.
I mean, the London meetup, the London Gophers, it's packed. It's sold out every month, or was, and so that's especially important if you're at capacity.
Yeah.
So one story. I know you like stories, Matt, so I'm going to give you a story.
Gather round, everyone. Could you do it really close to the mic, Johnny, so it sounds like you're all close?
And I'm going to use my deep voice for you.
Yeah, people will love that. I'll get letters.
So in the early days of community organizing, I learned a lesson that I've never forgotten. And to this day, it is one of the sort of the core principles that I hold to when I'm organizing meetups and things like that. I had organized an event and sort of dealing with the same logistical issues that Nali was just talking about, right? So, basically I had planned for an event to happen at a particular venue on a particular date, ordered food and all that stuff, and sort of, doing all that logistic stuff. And then it turned out that the last minute, sort of the organization, sort of that we're gonna host the event, the location, they had an event happening on that day. It was very last minute, and we kind of had to, sort of scramble. Virtually the same story now we just talked about, right? So you're scrambling sort of last minute. And then thankfully I had I think it was like 2 or 3 days, right? It wasn't like the day before, like Natalie's, but really like close enough to be like, oh man, it's like, I might as well just, maybe I was, maybe it was my ego. I was kind of bruised a little bit. I'm like, this is, I don't like this, right? So I decided to cancel the event, right? Mm-hmm. And later on, right, and after I'd organized sort of a makeup or follow-on event, whatnot, later on, I had somebody come during that event and tell me, hey, the last time you had organized this event, I'd gotten babysitter, I'd made arrangements, I had basically, you could tell they're from an underrepresented group, so they're already struggling, right, financially, right, to be able to set time aside from work. They probably work multiple jobs, and they had to take time off, and they had to find babysitter, go out of pocket. There's a certain side of this tech industry that we all live in that we just don't see, right? Because we're all making good money. We're all technologists, coders, developers, programmers, whatever it is. We don't see those trying to get in. We don't see the same struggles, because if we did struggle like that, we're long past that. So we've forgotten, right? So for those of you who have forgotten, remember this, right? The folks that are trying to get into this community, folks that are trying to be just like you, right? You are the person they want to be when they grow up, right? Folks that are trying to be just like you, right? They have to overcome a lot more struggles than showing up to an event. They have so much going on in their lives, right? In order for them to actually make that event, right? They have to make some sacrifices, right? That you may not never hear about, right? As an event organizer, or even as an attendee sitting right next to them, right? So that lesson, basically, I took that to heart. I was like, oh, you know what? I cost somebody, right? Time, money, anxiety. I created an unwelcoming, sort of a non-inclusive, non-caring situation that I'm just glad they were able to come back, right? And try again a second time. But after I learned that lesson, I'm like, if I'm going to put together an event, okay, I better make sure that I have a backup, or have some sort of alternative, or I try to go out of my way to at least try ahead of time. There's some things you can't control as an event organizer, and Natalie and Rana will tell you that. You just can't control for all the variables, but and you don't have to. You just have to factor in there are some people that are going to make some certain sacrifices to be part of something that you're putting together. And you as an attendee, right, there are some things you can do, right? If you are SVP for an event, especially one that's been sold out and you no longer want to come, just on RSVP, right? and create a spot for somebody else who perhaps has made some sacrifice so that they could be there. So that's for them to be able to make it, right? And if your organizer, if you're going to a conference and they have a scholarship program like Rana organizes, like give money to that, right? These are some very real, very tangible ways you can actually help, right? Or community organizing, conference organizing, meetup running, that's not for everybody. We're not asking everybody to do that. But as a fellow human being, there are some things you can do to actually show support and be supportive of those who are doing that work, right? So I just wanted to sort of put that out there, because I think sometimes we all forget that, our day-to-day, the way we sort of go about things in tech, like there's an entire other side of that we don't see, we don't get to experience because we're so far removed from it, but it is there.
That's a great thing. Thank you. Well, it's that time again. It's time for our regular slot, Unpopular Opinion.
Unpopular opinion.
I actually think you should probably leave.
Unpopular opinion.
So who's got an unpopular opinion they would like to share? It can be tech related, but doesn't have to be. It can be about organizing, but doesn't have to be.
Rana, do you want to go?
I can go, unless you want to go.
Please do.
We've got ourselves a polite off.
So I know, so polite.
Yeah.
Live log.
Yeah. You don't have to have two cases to generalize behavior to an interface, or to take an interface or to use an interface, as far as I see it. And this is coming from my experience before Go. And I think it works very well with Go as well. Interfaces are a good way to implicitly document what kind of behavior you anticipate from the type that you're taking in, and what kind you don't, right? It creates a small subset of things that the type should be able to support. And the first thing that you even see when you look at the function signature is the function signature. And the first thing that you see is the types. If you have that, documentation can be a little bit more loose. The behavior of the concrete type can change, but your function is decoupled for generations to come, and any maintainer will understand what they're supposed to be doing with this code, and what this code is supposed to be able to do, and especially what it cannot or shouldn't be doing, or you didn't anticipate that it should be doing. Yeah, and there is another point there, because in Go, when using an interface, we are causing an allocation to the heap. So there's something to say about that. It's a performance enhancement, obviously, or not necessarily something that you should be considering. But if your program does require that kind of zero allocations consideration, you might want to forget about everything that I just said. But I think that we should treat this as a limitation, and not as in Go, and not as something that is wanted and is good experience.
Yeah, so interesting. So I hear sometimes, and I think I've said also sometimes, talk about this idea of early abstraction. But what you've said really does make sense about, if you're using an interface to tell a story, or I like what you said about you can just choose a subset of what you need. So if there is a concrete type that you're thinking of when you build your thing, but you're only going to use a couple of the methods, having an interface with just those couple of methods in is a great storytelling and communicates very clearly the intent of what you're going to use that thing for. And of course, the fewer methods, the easier interfaces are to implement as well. That's a great one, actually, Rana. Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Yeah, that's going in the Hall of Fame, that one.
Really? Oh my God.
Yeah. We don't have a Hall of Fame.
I am bowing right now. You can't see me, but I'm bowing right now.
See, Natalie might have ruined it. She was clapping, so they're going to think they have to cut that out.
You're not cutting that
We
out.
said this is the same for keep, right?
You are not cutting that out. That remains forever. Okay.
That remains. What about you, Natalie? Do you have one?
Yes, I missed the note that the unpopular opinion should be Go related, because this is a Go related podcast.
It doesn't have to be Go related.
Doesn't have to be. Nope.
Oh, yay. All right.
Yeah, anything.
Then it has a long preparation. So diversity needs to be improved on many different fronts. Some fronts have improved, some fronts have improved less. It's hard to say there is any front or any type of diversity that is fixed and the problem is no longer there. And I'm putting a lot of work into gender diversity. Rana is putting a lot of work into general diversity. But for me, gender diversity is not the main goal. I don't have a main goal when I'm working on diversity. One goal that is very close to my heart is bringing people from different countries like we spoke today. And I prepared some numbers. So Gophercon Europe speakers who are born, raised, and live in an African country in 2018 was 10%. It was supposed to be higher, but too many people had their visa either rejected or just never responded to. So that we applied all the documents, we prepared everything, we helped the speaker gather all the documents they need, and they just did not hear back. We ended up with having 10%, so 1 out of the 10 speakers actually coming from an African country. And this still was a way bigger effort than reaching 50-50 speakers of men and not men. That was Gophercon 2018. In 2019, it was slightly better. 2 out of the 12 came from an African country. And in 2020, the current lineup is 4 out of the 28, which is still pretty much the same. Cloud9, it's also 1 of 8. And B-Sides, which is a small local conference about security that I'm doing, is 1 of 6. I have yet to break the limit of 20% of the speakers coming from an African country, which is a personal mission of mine. And it's really, really hard. Now, this was all the preparation. Here goes the unpopular opinion. A conference that has a lineup of speakers who are diverse, but still all of them are coming either from Europe or from America or the US, is not the most diverse thing. For me, I'm looking to evaluate the conference, whether they are really diverse on my criteria. I'm looking where the speakers, which countries they come from. And if it's not an easy country where the visa is not an issue, for example, or giving such an opportunity it is a big deal versus a huge deal, this is what makes a difference for me. And it's like not a good recommendation to give to conference organizers to focus on this, because it's basically recommending people to do a lot of extra work. Because working on somebody's visa requires your legal preparation with probably 5 different types of documents. On top of that, this is just from Europe. I'm sure the US is harder, at least in these times. So on top of those types of legal documents, you have to prove all kinds of financial support. You have to prepare things like flights, even though that they don't even have a visa yet. They already need to present tickets, accommodation, which is maybe slightly easier. Plenty of documents to show that those people will go back. So rental contract, health insurance, connections, like if you're married or you have parents, a job, last salaries. So basically, you're spending many hours with each person you want to bring, whether that's a speaker or an attendee, just making the legal parts of it. And still, I find this incredibly important as an aspect of diversity, and I think this is not being discussed enough.
I'd like to add to that one of the issues that I was struggling with. So I had also my own struggles with bringing people to Gophercon Europe as attendees with the diversity scholarships. And something else that has been nagging at me for the past 3 years is how intimidated they are by authority. So depending on where they are, some places more than others, but depending on where they are, they treat authority very differently than what I would, or a lot of people would. And also in a lot of countries, these services are completely privatized. So they don't actually meet a German trying to enter Germany. They will meet some private company, and we don't actually know anything. So for instance, Germany, might on its own, for instance, say like, great, so somebody is going to come in, they have hotel, they have, they're going to pay here, there's going to be some business done locally. That's great for our economy, but I don't know necessarily what is going on through the heads of a private company, and how, at the end of the day, how people are going to be treated when they show up. And I have no idea how to guarantee, for instance, how this meeting is going to go. And there's a lot of fear around this. And yeah, definitely not discussed enough. Thank you, Natalie, for bringing this up.
I wonder if we could make like a video of seeing a kind of the end-to-end process, for just to sort of show that it's at least possible. Because I understand that reluctance to, especially if you've never been on a plane before. Just imagine that. And you're going to just fly somewhere and someone's definitely going to meet you at the airport. You just just can't imagine those things happening, probably.
No, they're very adventurous. I'll say that. Like, we're definitely getting, the... Yeah, I love every single person so far, and also the people that we couldn't bring. Like, really. It's definitely a privilege.
All the diversity that the Go community has makes it a better community. So thank you for everyone on this and everyone listening that does help with that, does contribute. I think we should try and be the most diverse tech community there is. Why not?
So I don't have a lot of unpopular opinions too often.
It's a good opening. Strong start. But
and maybe it's not even an unpopular one. But so here's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I'm not sure if it's because we're all home and can't really go anywhere, shouldn't really go anywhere, and just more time to think. But diversity efforts shouldn't only be the burden of those carrying it. Okay? If you recognize the benefits of a diverse community or workplace, then get off your tush and help make it a reality, right? If you've been sort of wishing, right, that your local tech community was more diverse, stop agonizing, organize, right? You can play a role in this. You can't leave it up to others, least of all those that are trying to sort of step out from that shadow, from that cloud, right? It's everybody's responsibility, not just those who have to deal with it. All right, so there's room there, right?
That's a fair point. I mean, it sounds like a targeted attack on me, but it's, as a general point, I think is absolutely right. I mean, it's a good point. It's, that's why talking about this stuff is important, because this is how we find out about these things. Because it's not obvious. This stuff isn't obvious to people that aren't in these groups. So good point. Fair point. Community gives back. I guess, again, that's what you were saying in your keynote, Johnny. Johnny's keynote's also still available on the internet. You can find it with your favourite search engine by typing in something, Johnny or something, and then, I don't know the exact keywords, but I assume Johnny and then keynote, Johnny Borsico. Mind you, spelling Borsico is also a bit of a challenge for people, isn't it? Maybe.
It can be, but the internet will help you.
My watch has found it. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Natalie, Ronna. It was great. Thank you again for all you do, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Go Time. If this show has informed you, entertained you, or brought you joy in any way, please leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts, star us in Overcast, heart us on Spotify, and tell a friend. We truly appreciate your support. Thanks again to Ronna and Natalie for joining the show. Y'all are a ton of fun. This episode was hosted by Matt Ryer with Johnny Borsico. It was produced by Jared Santo. That's me. And our music is brought to you by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. We have awesome sponsors. Please support them. They support Go Time. Special thanks to Fastly, Linode, and Rollbar. That's all for now. We'll talk to you next time.